Yo, what's going on, everyone? Strokefish here, back again for my obligatory first video and then never post again. Here, joined with me today for another draft classic, this time season 14 draft analysis. I'm joined by the fellows that you see on your screen right now that are written out at the bottom. First up, we got Mr. Inversify. Yeah. We also have Sully slash Monsoon.
Yo, it's good.
Yeah, there we go. And then we finally, last but certainly not least, we have Ant-Man.
How's it going, guys?
All right, so we'll get right into it. There's only 12 teams this season, so it's going to make for a little bit less of a long draft analysis video. I know people love the long form content, but hopefully we're going to try to keep this pretty concise. I genuinely didn't pre-think any of these thoughts about any of these drafts like I did last time, so we'll see how this goes. But first up, we have Laik Ross of the Rhode Island Mewtwo's, a longtime participant of Draft Classic, I guess, but also hasn't really been in a lot of seasons in the middle. He was kind of active really early and also active just in the server where we host, but hasn't participated until recently. So it's fun to have him back and the seniors competing against him. And since he had the first overall pick, he decided to pick up Giratina Origin. So that's a mon that we allowed this season. And will be interesting to see how it's performing on a player that most likely knows how to use it pretty well. Any initial thoughts from anyone on this draft?
Giratina shouldn't have been allowed.
Great.
I know you guys say that. I don't like. I know it's strong. Like, it obviously should have been 15 points, but I don't think it's like.
I don't think it's overbearing too. And we can kind of start with a discussion about Giratina, because I think this is, if anyone is coming in from this video from an outsider's perspective, outside of Draft Classic, this is kind of a thing that we do with leagues that we are run by our all Lord and Savior Kraken Nation. We tend to be a little bit less ban heavy. We try to unban things and see if they're good, bad, like kind of test them out. And if they're too much, then we just ban them the next season. So things like Naganadel and like Genesect we had in season. That was kind of a crazy season because we had a lot of
everyone got a little taste of broken that season.
Yeah, but we have a lot of like really kind of borderline Terramons that people are like, oh, this is too broken, like Terrabax Caliber. What else do we have? Terra Sneasler's on this team too, another mon that generally can't Terra. So we have a lot of Pokemon that you normally can't Terra that we've allowed to, and since that power level is higher, it typically tends to balance out. And Giratina, I personally, I'll give my opinions first, and I'll let you guys kind of give your own thoughts, Sean, if you want to elaborate on why you think, and then we can get the Legs team in general. But
Giratina specifically.
yeah, so to kind of echo Sully's point a little bit, I think it's too slow to really kind of capitalize on a lot of its pretty solid offenses, but it's not like breaking the game. Like, it's item locked for one, so it's loses that aspect, and using a lot of item locked Pokemon in the past. Generally, Giratina is, in my opinion, probably better than both those two Pokemon. But that being said, with offensive typing, it's still a Pokemon that is locked, and you know exactly, like, you can't run Scarf. You know generally what kind of like investment it's gonna be running. It can be bulky, but that's kind of where it's gonna be a little bit interesting to see if, like, okay, are you gonna run a special set, are you gonna run a physical set, are you gonna run like more of a bulky variant with Calm Mind, which is probably gonna be its best set. Is gonna be like a bulky Rest Talk, Calm Mind, maybe Pain Split or something like that. Some priority,
Just like Geist and Shadow Sneak and
or even mixed. Yeah.
Well, I think its
Anyway,
home class set is
it's
good.
item locked, but its item is like one of the best items in the game. So.
True, right. It's a basically like a Soldu for Giratina. So that's interesting. I will say though, it did lose Hone Claws, which is why I kind of was leaning more towards unban. Yeah, so that's kind of like, if it got Hone Claws, then it would 100% accurate Poltergeist. No, thank you. I probably would have said maybe ban, but I kind of am on the side of unban because it just feels too slow, and it really just can't get a lot going because it can't run boots, so it's gonna take hazard damage, and it's a hazard clear, but you don't want it to be your hazard clear. And looking at Laik's team, Iron Treads is going to be kind of having to hold it down in the hazard clearing department. So definitely
All it takes from hazards is 12% from rocks.
right,
Which is
but it's
Yeah.
still it's enough to put in like 2 at KO range from some things.
Considering that it
let's
can't
talk about
recover.
draft because it doesn't have just Giratina. And one point that I want to make is that I think Terra Iron Bundle is a very, very good Pokemon, and I think Terra Iron Bundle should not have another high tier Terra next to it. Because the ideal way to use Terra Iron Bundle most of the time is going to be, hey, I'm leading with it turn 1, I'm clicking Terra Water, so that way I'm not weak to rocks. And I'm clicking Flip Turn if I have a bad matchup, or clicking Hydro Pump or Terra Blast.
Yeah, that's very fair. That's very because all you need is it's
Take
3 water
away
moves and
your
then freeze
option
dry.
from your other high tier Terra.
What
Plus, Iron Bundle almost always wants to run Terra Blast, so you're losing a lot of value by not clicking Terra with it right away. And there's Sneasler is like something that can share because it doesn't need to click Terra until later in the game. Iron Bundle is something that does not want to share. So that's really my biggest gripe with this draft.
do you
Otherwise,
think
I think the defense, I think it's like a very solid overall draft. It's got like a decent amount of offense. It's got a good amount of bulk. It's maybe a little reliant on Umbreon for the bulk just because it has no reliable recovery outside of Umbreon's wishes. That might be tasking Umbreon with a little bit much, although Umbreon is one of the better wish passers in the game. I guess also technically for Graf is a wish passer, but it's not a good Pokemon and probably should not be brought.
could have some niche brings? I like its well actually defensively with Giratina it's like only all right because of ghost immunity.
I can see matchups where like if Umbreon gets overwhelmed, like this team can't do enough damage before it just gets chipped down and loses. And I could see matchups where it's Umbreon doesn't get chipped or like dealt with, and it's just very, very obnoxious to play against.
I see like certain kind of like fast fightings being a really big problem for or just like offensive fightings in general because most of them are going to have coverage for Sneasler and Giratina, and you don't want to be switching in Giratina preemptively. I mean, you can. They just have to be like slower, and if they're strong enough, they can just like bop it with some like strong attack. I mean, granted, it's not going to die, but then you're taking a ton of damage on your Giratina, so it's
A
gonna.
lot of the fightings though, like want to run knockoff, and like that's kind of the saving grace of it being item locked is that it's like not taking the boost from knockoff.
I think it is
And to like
from knockoff.
I think it is. It just doesn't lose that item, so it's like even worse.
The item so it takes the boosted knockoff every single time.
Yeah, because
I
it's
think-
1.5 damage if it has an item.
I think he will. Like you're right that the Umbreon will be taking on most of the bulk in the wish passing and all that. So I feel like, but he will be able to. Like, I really do like the breakdown of the draft with Tinkaton, Umbreon, and Farafariv. Even though you guys don't say it's that great, I could see it doing well against like Spec and things like that.
Fair.
he's got a lot of utility too, like rocks on Tinkaton, on Port, on Iron Tread, spinning and volting with like booster and stuff. And Giratina, I feel like most of the time is going to be run a little bit more bulky, running like Wisp or Thunderwave with like Hex, just trying to be a little bit more annoying than it is like it's going to be more annoying setting up Sneasler and Bundle to like clean later.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very good point. That I think Giratina it could be like a breaker if he needs it to be, but it's more of just like setting up Sneasler and Iron Bundle with all the other pivots that he has on this team. Not one of them not being Pincurchin. I'm a little upset he took Pincurchin, but it's all good, man. But yeah, overall, I think very solid draft. I just don't think it's like I don't think it's like the best draft. But I do think Terra Sneasler is fun, and I think to Sean's point, Terra Iron Bundle kind of is a little bit off in its synergy, but I still think he had the points to spare. I think defensively is kind of my main gripe with it. I think it just has a lot of like common weaknesses and a lot of stuff that I could see like a strong fire type with like ground coverage just like powering through this team. I guess we need some for Giratina. So there's like one Mon that's kind of like saving one Pokemon from going off, but like if you can somehow weaken that one Mon, then the path to victory against this team seems feasible.
It does kind of feel like a jack of all trades, master of none draft.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So in light of that, I will give this draft. I'm between 6 and 7 out of 10, but I'll round up, so I'll do 7 out of 10.
I was thinking more like 6 out of 10.
Okay, very fair. Yeah,
I'm going
definitely
with the
above
7 out of
average
10.
for sure. I mean, with the Giratina Origin and Terra Sneasler and decent hazard removal and utility, it's pretty solid. So average of 6.5. Sorry. Sorry, I'll just let someone else do overall.
Total. My bad.
Sean, you're doing total?
I thought you were just gonna do total here, but that's fine. 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, we'll just do average.
Technical
That's probably easier to
difficulties.
calculate. Okay, so solid above average draft. Probably will stack up decently in the end, but I don't know. There's a lot of pretty decent drafts. So, okay, moving on to the Greenwich Glaceons, coached by Unit, another coach that we haven't seen for a little bit, returning to make their seniors mark again. Decided to go kind of the more Sun team route. Shout out Sully whenever he drafted that, like what 2-3 seasons ago.
Yeah.
Definitely a little bit more
Mine-
unconventional, but
Yeah, mine was structured a little bit differently. Mine was a little bit more drag spam because I had Wake, Moon, and Raging Bolt. Just
I think
to
yours
because
definitely leaned harder into Sun. Actually, one of the things I really like about this draft is that it's definitely like fully functional outside of Sun. Like you could easily bring like if Sun didn't have a great matchup, you could easily find like a normal looking team.
yeah, like Great
I-
Tusk, Walking Wake, Cinderace, Rotom Wash, Bronzong, and then like Hoopa or Slitherwing or Hat.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was very similar to a team like I would build where it's like got very balanced options and you can pretty much bring any of your Pokemon on any given week. And I
Yeah.
think that gives you an advantage in prep because your opponent just has to prep for more things. Like with the last draft we saw, you don't really have to prep for like a Furkaraf very much unless it's got like a surprisingly good matchup like Ant said into like a Spectre. Maybe I have to prep, maybe my opponent will bring it. But with this team, you could really bring pretty much any Pokemon any given week. So it just widens the number of threats your opponent has to prepare for.
yeah, I think Wake is really the only like obviously Wake and Venusaur are like the two big things that like love having Sun Up. Wake, when I had it, we did national decks, so we banned Terra, and I will say Wake was probably the main thing that like really wanted to Terra in a lot of matchups just to kind of get the extra oomph to like
Yeah.
blast through things. I think Cinderace under Sun is gonna be really really annoying.
Yeah.
Because I had it last season, and it's kind of the same thing. Like it wanted just a little bit more oomph in some matchups to like blow through things, but you always want to run like boots on it because like he doesn't have a ton of. Well, I guess he has 3 rock setters, but like yeah, no,
Yeah.
he has a really good job of like controlling hazards between Magic Bounce, Court Change, and Rapid Spin.
Great touch.
Um,
Total.
Yeah,
But, like,
literally probably the
Cinderace-
best hazard clearing or like hazard control in the game, like that he has.
Cinderace being able to run boots, but also having like strong Pyro Ball is like definitely a bonus for it. And then I like having like kind of similar to what you were saying with the last draft, like Walking Wake always wants to click Terra to like blow through things, but like having Torkoal have the option to Terra to like preserve it,
Yeah,
like
I like
getting up
this
Sun.
Terra allotment a lot more because like most of the time you're going to be doing Walking Wake. Torkoal is a Pokemon that you're going to bring anyway. There is definitely a lot of utility with like you could always click like Terra Grass or Terra Flying and then on like an opponent's Earthquake and then maybe pick up a major like kill and also keep your Sunsetter alive if you don't necessarily need to Terra Walking Wake. Like I like that it's a Pokemon that's probably going to come often. It doesn't really need to Terra, but it does gain a lot if you haven't clicked Terra with Walking Wake yet. Your opponent always in the back of their mind has to be thinking like, okay, Earthquake isn't a completely safe click against this Torkoal.
Yeah.
Because might click his Terra Flying and I'm doing no damage. Maybe I die and now I'm in like a terrible spot and I don't have enough sacks against Walking Wake or something to win the game. So I do really like this team's Terra a lot.
I might be leaking tech, but he also has 3 Trick Room setters with a Torkoal, a Hat, and like Hoopa can be run like really slow to like abuse Trick Room, like to like be prepping for like booster spam. Because like Great Tusk, when I had it, like generally always wanted to be like booster speed, just to like be more supportive in a lot of matchups. So like prepping for like trying to be faster than Tusk and Wake and Cinder and like all these things can be really annoying if he wants to like flip the matchup and set up Trick Room and just start breaking with like a Life Orb hat, or like even Torkoal with like Eruption and like Terragrass Solar Beam.
I love the versatility that this draft has.
Like as you were saying, Sean, like it feels like most matchups you do want to have Terra Walking Wake, but there might just be some odd matchups where you might just not want to have Terra Walking Wake. And you're right, like a Terra Torkoal on paper, like you say Terra Torkoal, and I'm like, yeah, what, like cool. But then if the matchup just works, like that could be like that game-changing turn right there. And then that actually sounds really scary in this team.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of matchups or a lot of game states where it's like I really want to keep my Sunsetter alive,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so I think Terra on Torkoal might help it
Yeah,
do just a little bit more for not that expensive of a price.
It gives you an out too. Like if you're like late in the game and you're like, okay, I need Sun, for like maybe your Sun's about to end, but you're in a weird position with Torkoal. You're like, okay, I need just like one more turn for Sun to end, but Torkoal's gonna die if I don't Terra, and it like creates that like 50-50 of like, okay, is he gonna Earthquake or is he gonna like predict my Terra and go for like an Ice Beam or something, you know?
Right.
So it creates a necessary and really awesome. So honestly, to sum it all up, I really and we haven't even mentioned like other random Pokemon like Slitherwing and Hoop Unbound, which both, well, Slitherwing especially is a really really cool mon in this draft because not only does it fit, I mean, granted he already has a great Tusk, but like in terms of like pivoting around and just getting strong U-turns off, it gives him that like strong U-turn, but also can function well in and out of Sun. So genuinely, like, I'm trying to think of too many problems that this draft has. Like, I think it kind of covers its weaknesses pretty well. I do think that there are going to be situations where like he's going to struggle on like on the special side, like if he can't get Walking Wake going, or if he like Walking Wake gets killed, a lot of like physically defensive Pokemon will kind of just eat this team alive. Like I wish there was like maybe like a strong ghost type would be really nice for this team, or like Hoop Unbound is there, but it definitely has to be wary on what it's clicking. It's not super fast. It's a great breaker, but that was the one pick where I'm like, okay, like it's a very good breaker, but could kind of be a double-edged sword in that regard. So but overall, I would.
The biggest thing for me is like if this team like gets behind the 8 ball, like if they have a couple bad turns early game, there's really like almost no recovery on this draft.
Oh no,
So
there's
it's
not a
really
lot of
like
recovery at all on this draft.
you're working with what you got pretty much. So you have a bad couple turns, like lose some stuff early, and he's probably going to be just in a hole that it's going to be hard to come out of.
Yeah, or if there's like a
I
tech
still
to
like
go
this
against
team, so I'm
Sun.
going to give it a 9 out of 10.
I was also
think
yeah.
Oh, I thought I was high on it, giving it an 8 out of 10. But
I know I because I genuinely can't think of that many flaws other than just like the play style of Sun kind of eliminate, like it's probably the best Sun team that I'm seeing. No, in draft, no shade to you, Sully, but I think this is just structured a little bit better in terms of like hazard removal and everything along those
I
lines.
think
So
the best Sun teams still function without Sun.
yeah.
And that's the case here.
I
Because then
agree.
you can't just only prep for Sun. You have to prep for Sun, but you also have to prep for what if they just bring like 6 other good Pokemon and they don't even bring Sun.
Yeah. But I will say though, if he doesn't bring Sun, I do think that play style for him will still be somewhat less. Like he can have a winning game plan, but it's definitely going to neuter his team a little bit.
It's definitely wants to have Sun. It's just it can still function.
Right. You got 100%.
Called for it.
Okay. Anyway, moving on to another trolley team, but a little bit more so. We have Zay of the Suspicious Unibon Reshuckles, our last season's champion, deciding to go a completely different route than what he did last season, and keep his Torn, but decide to go completely in the stall direction.
I mean, he had like a semi-stallish team.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't anywhere close to this level, but it was definitely like this is like how he likes to build teams, like very defensive. And it's a very good stall team, and he's a very good player, which makes me worried because of CSL veterans knowing this guy named Abda
Yeah.
Just do the exact same thing to everyone and just run stall teams and destroy.
Don't trigger us, please. I'm triggered hearing that name.
No, I think the bonus or like the upside to stall is that you don't have to get a ton of turns right. And like when you give a team like this, like to a person like Zai who like is a really, really good battler, like the fact that he only has to get like maybe 1 or 2 out of every like 10 turns right, as long as he's just like preserving things correctly, like it's really, really scary. And I think Urshifu and Tornadus and Doug Trio are like really good enablers to like shutting down stall breakers
Yeah.
to enable his stall.
I actually think the last pick, Talonflame, is also like that was like an excellent pick. I think that also helps a lot. That's a lot of certain things that would otherwise be very annoying for this draft. Being like a very fast taunter,
Yeah.
also hazard removal because
Yeah, like
I believe they're the only hazard removal on this team.
it's almost he needed something with hazard because that is his only defog. Anything with
And granted, he's gonna run boost spam on his entire team, but like at the same time, knock. So
knock off thing.
And he's not like I wouldn't say he's knock. He is still a little knock weak. Like none of those Pokemon love getting knocked, especially not like Blissey.
He's very conscious of the fact that he's knock weak with his Terra types.
Yeah. But I also don't think that's necessarily knock weak. It's more of just like certain matchups. I'm not gonna say too much, but I was just looking at it. I'm like, I can see what matchups you're putting those Terra types on for.
I was pretty surprised to see like Terra Ghost on Toxapex, but we'll see. It might just be to have a spin blocker option in certain matchups.
Mm-hmm. And it's better than Dondozo because I feel like Dondozo that's a mon that like you don't want to just gain a dark weakness, especially versus like all these strong dark special like a Darkrai or like all these dark special attackers. Like I look at his Dondozo, I'm like, oh cool, so it's just like a Pokemon that's meant to check these special darks or like any of these like offensive special attackers that would normally just blow through his team. Other than like Clefable or Blissey, but like most Pokemon have like a Psyshock option or like Body Press now. So that I think that's a detriment to stall a little bit now is because something like Blissey I think has lost a lot of leverage because of the fact that a lot of previously passive Pokemon could now just Body Press and not really have to worry about it being like something like a Sandy Shocks, which no one drafted, but just as an example, like a Sandy Shocks versus his team. I guess he has a Doug, but he could just run like Sheto or something. You can just like Body Press. Like Blissey's no longer an answer.
I think Blissey is more of just like extra for this team. I don't think like Blissey is really one of the biggest. I mean, obviously it's the cheapest Pokemon on the draft as well.
Yeah.
Because he went again very balanced with his point spending.
Gives him rocks. It gives him utility.
Like, it makes it so like if somebody just has a very powerful special wall breaker that like otherwise can't be handled, like a Chi-Yu, like you could just always throw Blissey at that and just be really annoying.
Yeah, so definitely fair. So I don't know, and I think he said something about his Urshifu just like coming only like 90% of the time it's riding the bench or something. I don't know if he meant the bench or if he meant like if he was saying if he Terra'd it would not Terra.
We'll see. I mean, this is another team that could really bring almost anything on any given week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's like a weak link in it.
I would say what's it called? This isn't a weak link. This is more of just like some of the Stallmons he chose, Gliscor, and they are not even Stallmons, but just like Pokemon that are on this archetype, Gliscor, Tornadus, both Pokemon that could be, Rocky Helmet, or Tornadus case, Rocky Helmet, heavy duty boots with like especially defensive, like kind of like a, fast U-turn synergy, chip your team down kind of thing. Or they can be Sword Stance Facade, in Gliscor's case, Nasty Plot, Bleak Wind with that. Even something like Talonflame could be something like a Sword Stance set to catch you off guard. I don't think that would necessarily be run, but like something like a Dondozo with Curse, even like Calm Mind Blissey, Calm Mind Clefable, Cosmic Power. Like a lot of these mons have that you need a utility. And that's not even to mention a Moongus just being annoying as fuck with like Spore just putting you to sleep. And this is an annoying draft and genuinely one of the better stall teams that I've ever seen drafted. So I give him a lot of props.
Yeah, no one's going to want to play this.
Yeah. It is very scary from Tornadus Therian, as you were saying with Gliscor and Talonflame. I'm a little worried that it is the only defogger at the same time, that like it feels like it is rock weak and knock weak, but I feel like with the particular coach that we're talking about, they are very equipped and aware of that. So it's like they are going to be on top of their game if they're in a matchup that has all the rocks and all that kind of jazz. Uh, I pronounce that wrong, will be on top of anything, it seems. So we'll see how they do it.
And as a closing remark, I'm going to give this team personally a 9 out of 10, and I'll tell you why. Is because I think genuinely Stall is a good play style, but I think my main concern with this is just Gen 9 has just so, like, I'm looking at this team, and you see something like a Chan Pao, right? Granted, the team that has Chan Pao, I'm kind of just thought looking at the matchup, like, there's a lot of ways that could go, right? But you know what your switch in is. Like, you know that, okay, he's going to bring Shen Pao. What is my switch in? Dondozo. That is his Dondozo and maybe, like, Clef, maybe Pex, right? So
Yeah.
if a good player can exploit that, so I think Sully was saying this too in just, I don't know if this was one-on-one or in just a general sense. You're going to know, a good player is going to know how to exploit certain kind of, I don't know what the word is, like pathways of movement. So like say you bring in Shan Pao, you're gonna initially like start off that ball rolling, and you know what their series of plays is gonna be because that's how Stall operates. If they want to kind of deviate from that, they're not going to be making the best play. So it's kind of a hard thing. Like it kind of puts them out of their comfort zone, and it can really kind of shift the tide of the match. So I think Zay has to be really careful to be conscious of when he can play safe and when he has to kind of, okay, they know what I'm going to do. I have to play a little bit aggressive here, you know? So it's all going to be based on his play, and I think he's a very good player, so I think he's going to be able to do that. So okay, moving on to the Sion. I don't know how you pronounce that. Anyone want to give their guesses on that?
I'm going to say Sion Shinxes.
Sion Shinxes. We'll go with that. I like this draft. It's solid. I'm trying to think. I think it kind of it rounded out a little interesting. I do like how he's kind of stacking a good amount of like ground immunities and resist. Like it covers its top two pretty well. It's interesting for sure. I don't know. Anyone else have any more coherent thoughts?
I think it's going to rely a little bit heavily on Latios and Landorus to break, which Landorus doesn't always want to do in matchups, just because Zama sometimes takes a little bit too long to get going.
Mm-hmm.
But spiking up with Samurott and then being able to spin block with Petch, I wish he had a way to punish Defog a little bit harder.
Yeah, like an Ogre Pawn instead of Serena. Well, I guess Serena gives him hazard removal, but...
No, Serena is definitely a great spinner. It might be a tad bit rock weak.
Yeah, I was going to say with
maybe
Serena being his only spinner. Latios doesn't get defog anymore, right?
No.
Okay, so it's like, I think Articuno might get it. No, because the birds lost defog, right? Because Zapdos.
They did.
Yeah, so Serena, I will say that is kind of a detriment considering that something like Azama spikes, like that's kind of a big deal. Granted, Serena is a good spinner. And we're going to get to other drafts where like it's like, oh, spinning is kind of a non-factor, but when you do have an item locked Mon, you do have to take into consideration. So, like you were saying, there's no defog options. There's no so, and also like you were saying, I do slightly disagree though. I think that Latios and Landorus I think Samurot's a little bit stronger than people give it credit for. Entei can be a solid breaker in some games, but you're also, if you have to break with Entei with like a Terrafire, Sacred Fire, then you're taking away from Latios doing what it wants to do. So it's kind of a little bit negative synergy in that regard. And I think Zamazenta is a very, very solid Pokemon. But I think this team is actually very weak on the special side. I think Sylveon is going to be having to hold this thing down really, really hard. Because something like Petron does not appreciate taking... Like, Sylveon is just going to be super punished all the time from just taking repeated, like, Dark Pulses or Shadow Balls. And if you can get a play right and go for like a sludge bomb, or like maybe it's a mix attack or like a Hydreigon, like
Even like a taunt.
or a taunt, yeah, exactly, or like a U-turn, just like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna U-turn out into my like Pokemon that can abuse Sylveon, right? Because Sylveon's very abusable considering it doesn't get Mystical Fire anymore, so you have to be really careful with that Pokemon. I don't love Sylveon as a Pokemon in general because it just kind of is a momentum killer in a lot of
I think
aspects.
Zama's gonna end up having to burn its ability early in battles too to like take hits for Sylveon and Pedge in a lot of matchups.
Like it's just gonna be like, you know, Zama, it gets its ability once and that's cool, and then you just kind of deal with it.
Yeah,
And especially then if you have to burn the ability early.
Zama, I think that's generally how it gets played anyway now.
Yeah, it's more of like early game. I like late game is good, but I think it gains a lot more from being like an early mid game breaker. Iron Defense is probably still its best set, but it's very matchup dependent. And to his credit, he did take one of the best Zama answers in Pecharunt. So I don't know if he did that intentionally, but it is a good pickup in that. I think his special offense is a little bit lacking. His best special offensive Pokemon is Latios, which is great, and then Sylveon, and then like I guess Nasty Plot Pecharunt. But after that, it's like special Landorus. And none of those Pokemon are really like breaking the bank other than Latios. So you can kind of just like abuse that with more just defensive Pokemon. Like, okay, I'll just run Fizz Def on a lot of Pokemon, you know.
I think with Entei
I wish he
with
had like better ghost type answers defensively.
Mm.
Just given that his number one Pokemon is Zamazenta, and its number one set that it wants to run
Very
is Iron
true.
Defense Body Press, which obviously struggles the most against ghost types, which are immune.
Yeah, and Samurot's like kind of a
Ghost
meh.
type defensive answers based purely on that. Like Samurott Hisui is good at offensively checking ghosts. It can come in on ghost type moves like occasionally, maybe more if you can get like a Sylveon to wish pass to it. That's kind of asking a lot.
I would have really liked to see like a Terra Dark Latios. I think that could have been kind of cool.
My only point and last note on this is that I really do individually like the Terra Entei with the normal Fire and Grass. I think he was just going that for speed for like the boost there, like a mini version of. I think I'm missing there, but like I really do like that Terra option on Entei like a lot.
Yeah, I wish he had had the points to Terra Landorus though, but I do see the vision with Terra Entei too. I don't know, but I also think like Landorus and Latios being two high tier Terras together is way better in my opinion than because Latios. I think what Sean was saying first about Iron Bundle is Latios doesn't always want a Terra, but when it does, it wants to. But like having to prep for both Terra Landorus and Terra Latios makes it kind of difficult for your opponent to choose which one. Okay, this is more of a threat to me, so I'm gonna kind of put more of my eggs in that basket. So
the only thing with that is like again, it's like you don't want to be in that situation with a Pokemon that wants to run Terra Blast. So like one of Landorus Therian's biggest aspects with Terra is like you can run Terra Blast with Terra Flying and get Flying Stab, but then if you don't Terra, you're just wasting a move slot, and like Landorus especially.
That's fair. That's fair.
All of its move slots.
Yeah,
so
I do think
like if it's a Pokemon that's using Terra for like some kind of coverage, or like typically wants to run Terra Blast, you probably shouldn't Terra, like give it another Pokemon that really wants to Terra on your draft and is coming most weeks.
I will say a counterpoint to that for the Iron Bundle thing, because I was gonna say this before, but just a random aside. But like for Iron Bundle running Terra Blast, I don't know if it's necessarily as bad because you still number one have your like stab. It's not as reliable with Hydro Pump, but you also have Flip Turn, and Terra Blast is still special, so it's like not amazing, right? It's a special normal type move that's 80 base power and still gonna be kind of like not something you want to like lock into with like specs, but it's not like as detrimental as you were saying with Landorus.
It's not good.
I mean, it's not amazing, but I don't know, just food for thought. Okay, moving on to our boy Krakenation, who I don't know if he's even still here. Okay, I leaked DMs, but that's okay. Not with him, but all right. So he rebranded too, which is something of note. Syracuse University instead of our classic Boston Bishops that we're used to.
Number one in our hearts.
He is extremely silly.
Yeah. He what's it called? It's
and he drafted the most serious goose of all time. Zangoose.
True. I thought you were gonna say Dragapult.
That is the serious goose.
But yeah.
Well, Sean, considering you helped construct this draft in the latter half, do you want to give any of your thoughts?
I did. I think overall it's quite a good draft. I think Slowking Galar is like a very good partner for Dragapult. I've used that combo before to a championship. Um, I think it's an extremely good partner just because specifically with how well it deals with almost every fairy type. It pretty much checks every fairy type in the game, even stuff like Enamorus. It can check. Um, if you can tailor it to check Enamorus and other fairy types like that, and that's what Dragapult really struggles with. I'm also like really when I'm envisioning this team in my mind, I'm seeing like matchups where Dragapult comes in, U-turns on a fairy, and brings in like Terra Ogerpon Wellspring, and it just like clicks unstoppable Ivy Cudgels. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna
because
say like it's
I think
just
Terra Ogerpon Wellspring is like a fantastic Pokemon. Um, and I was a little against him picking it up at first, but I think I've really come around to it. I think it's like an exceptionally good fit with Dragapult as well because it really doesn't need to hit things super effectively. It just wants to hit things that are not resisting water. And most of the fairies don't resist water, and a lot of the ones that do, like Primarina, just get blasted by Power Whip, which
exactly.
also has, um, and even has like Water Absorb in its main form to really annoy water types. So I think that's like a really fantastic trio. King Gambit, I'm not like a huge fan of King Gambit. I think Terra King Gambit could be good. Especially if you're able to, if you're not in a like great position to Terra Ogerpon, you just Terra King Gambit at the end of the game. And if not, like King Gambit's still a good Pokemon even without Terra. Um, but ideally, it's like okay, if you have a real chance to break some holes, you Terra Ogerpon Wellspring, and if not, you just Terra King Gambit at the end. So I
Mm.
think this is like a good complementary Terra core, unlike what he had last season, which caused him to not want
And that was my main point too, because
not
if
want to play.
there's probably some people, I mean, there's only probably three people that know this, but or Akeem was between what was he gonna get? Rotom Wash, and he was like picking it. I'm like, this, it's like whatever, it's a fine Pokemon, but it was just too comfortable, right? It was like it was kind of lackluster. I'm like, we need power, man. We need some Ogerpon Wellspring. I drafted it last
Well,
season.
I think the draft would have gone in a different direction if he had gone Rotom Wash, obviously.
True, but I still
I
think
think
this is a
I
better
think it
variant
turned
of a
out
team.
pretty well. Just basically trying to fill out the latter half of his draft with some roles. I think Thunderous Therian, um, you know, I think it can punish some things. You know, it's an okay Pokemon. I'm not like the biggest fan of it, but I think like really the best thing it can do here is like wall break,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to trying to
Yeah,
put some kind of sweeper set.
It's
To
Thunderous
get
misses Terra on this draft, but like it's kind of hard to pass up on
yeah,
Terraing Ogre and
I
King
think
Gambit.
there were some plans that didn't Terra Ogerpon Wellspring and instead Terra Thunderous Therian, but I think Ogerpon Wellspring
it's way better.
I think Ogre is mid if it's not Terra,
Yeah,
Oh, it's
especially
so
on this
bad.
draft. It wants mid game breaking power with Ogre.
absolutely. To let Dragapult and King Gambit clean up, so I think Ogerpon is super vital in that sense.
And then
I think
Thunderous Therian is still like a decent like special breaker. Um,
I think it's a
which
great complement to both Ogerpon and King Gambit too, because Dragapult is more of a chip. Like it can be specs, it can be banded if it wants to life orb, but like
right.
he needed breaking, and Thunderous gives that in spades. Granted, there are
I
some
think
bad
it, I think
matchups
it
for it, but
also is important because it gives him like a very viable Scarfer in that tier.
yep,
Whereas like Dragapult, you can run its Scarf. It's not horrible, but it's like already kind of lacking in power, and it's like it doesn't usually need Scarf unless there's something like crazy like a Scarf Meowscarada or something. But I think Thunderous Therian is like a good just like general Scarf option, which the team otherwise kind of lacked. So I do like it for that aspect. I know he really likes Diancie. I think it's a good, pretty good Pokemon. Donphan's just a good like utility bot. Like it's like cheap and it has pretty good hazard removal, and it does well for what it offers. Fourth Worm, I don't think Shed is like particularly amazing for this team, just because there's not like a ton of like amazing setup Pokemon. The biggest thing would be like Ogerpon Wellspring with like a Sword Stance. I think if you were
ooh
in like
yeah,
a Sword Stance Trailblaze set in a matchup where you could get away with like just running your stab moves, maybe. But I don't think like Shed is like that amazing for this team.
Shedtails, I think to build on that point, this team wants to pivot quite a bit between U-turn, Pole, Shelly, Slowking,
He's
Volt
got
Switch,
a ton of
Montundi.
great pivots. So
Yeah,
I don't love the Shed Tail, but it's also just like another hazard bot. I think the team was maybe a little bit earthquake weak with like the Slow King Galar and like Ogre Pond Wellspring as your grass. Doesn't always want to
No, yeah.
like it
And
might get rid
Thunderous
of his
Therian doesn't
ground
even want to
persist,
switch into
but it
stuff
doesn't
too.
necessarily always want to be switching into things, especially because it doesn't usually have the move slot to run synthesis in most matchups. So I think this draft was looking a little ground weak, so at least that kind of patches that up as a steel type that's immune to ground.
I could see
That
like
was
a
kind of
ground type.
picking it.
A ground type could definitely be a problem for this team. Like just like even
It
still with
definitely could.
Orthworm, but it
You're
does
not
it
bringing Worm every week.
right. Yeah,
I
you
wouldn't
don't want to
bring
have to bring
all
Orthworm. So
this draft.
It
But I
might
think
be a
that they're
tad.
going to end up running flying the most out of these King Gambit Terra types for that reason.
right.
It might be a tad bit fighting weak, just because most fighting types are fighting plus not coverage, which this team doesn't love.
I think like Slow King, it's so. I'm a huge Slow King Galar fan, and it really, if you want it to beat a fighting type, it can beat a fighting type. If you want it to beat a fairy type, it can beat a fairy type. It can't always check multiple things at once. But like
Mhm.
Culber Slow King um, beats like almost every fighting type.
True.
Just because like you take
It can
less
offensively
damage
deal
from
with
first
them
knock,
too.
less damage from other knocks. I'm more worried about like fighting types with like Earthquake could be
Yeah.
really annoying.
Which most of them do
Yeah.
too.
So it's kind of just needing to rely on like Don Fan being physically bulky and not getting chipped down. But there's definitely like holes in the team still. But I think there's also going to be matchups where like if he stays ahead of the curve with like good pivoting and making good reads, I think it's going to be like a very oppressive draft. to play
Oh
against.
yeah, for sure. Especially with King Gambit in the back too. Like if he doesn't, he's like,
Yeah.
oh, you know what? I don't need to tear
Always got to
Overpawn
be
right now.
wary about that. So
Mhm.
you can't just go willy nilly and let everything get chipped because you're just going to lose to the excellent cleaners in Dragapult and King Gambit in the back.
Exactly. So I think there to point out those holes. I think this is definitely a solid draft. I'm between 8 and 7 out of 10. I think 8 is a very solid benchmark though. I don't think 7 was even a consideration, but
Yeah.
glad I
I
could
mean,
contribute.
it's hard to say that like King Gambit can't just like
Right.
sneak
Just, like,
wins out at the
match up
end.
on a fighting
Yeah,
type.
just
Yeah, like
yeah.
you said, like fighting types with ground type coverage. Well, then he runs Terrifying King Gambit.
And not to mention two really great shouts for the like shitter Pokemon at the end, Zangoose and Hitmonchan. Like gives you hazard clearing, gives a cool speed tier with Zangoose, and just a Pokemon that people have to worry about because in strong normal type with any team that's like this is gonna be nice.
Like if you didn't want to go into Ogre Pond Wellspring for whatever reason, off like a Dragapult U-turn, you can go Zangoose, and like for 2 points, that's still packing a lot of power.
Especially on like those ghost type attacks, it's like okay, this thing has like probably gonna click Shadow Ball here. Maybe I can get an aggressive Zangoose switch, get nothing like no damage, and then I get my Toxic Orb procced. You just have to hope they don't have knockoff too. So, okay, yeah. Moving on to our first. Actually, I think our first of the ones that we have, or the coaches that we have with us today. We have a Monsoon Solis draft. So as per we always talk about, you can kind of say your own thoughts on your draft before we get into it.
I think this team is going to rely a ton on just getting stuff in and breaking, which was kind of why the fat stuff that I picked, I prioritized getting pivoting, like Uxie, U-turning, Belly Bowl, switching, Aloe, flip turning, especially considering Palafin has to get in and get out to get activated. I need a lot of pivoting. I kind of just made my mind up early that I wanted Excadrill because I wanted the ground type, a good steel type, and a spinner in that slot. And then it was like, the next wheel came around and it was like, well, it's kind of hard to pass up T-Tar because I also wanted knockoff support, and T-Tar can be offensive and, be the Dragon Dance set, but a lot of times it does offer a lot of good utility with like rocks, knock, thunder wave, having the ability to be a mixed attacker. But I think I am going to have to get a lot of pivoting turns right to get in like Kyurem, Palafin, and Excadrill to break. I might be a tad bit weak to people getting up hazards and just like abusing me getting turns wrong, but we'll face that when we get there.
Yeah, I think your team definitely is solid. Like, you can't really pass up. I mean, like you said, I don't know if you said this explicitly, but Terra Excadrill, Terra Kyurem, two Pokemon that you really have to respect. Um, and Shaman Sky Palafin is just an incredible, top two core in terms of offensive capabilities. And I think it's going to be really hard for teams to outpace you when you want to. Like, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm always going to get the jump on you with either Shaman being the fastest mon in the field, Palafin jet punching you, Sandrush Excadrill. I think Hazard's going to be your biggest weakness. I think your team is a little bit knock weak. And I think what I like about Sand teams is having a really strong offensive fairy. I recall in Gen 7 when I used like a Mega T-Tar team with Exca. I had Toxicroak on that team too, and I love that Pokemon. I think you'll really enjoy using it on a Sand team. It just has a lot of versatility in the sets that it can run, like special, physical. It's pretty strong too. So, and I like stuff like Belly Bolt on this team too. It's just kind of a fun Pokemon that is really, really strong and just can sponge hit. So I think Hazard's knock weakness, and I think you're going to be kind of pigeonholed into running Terra Fairy a lot because of just how Sand teams kind of run with matchups. But yeah, I think you're a creative enough builder where I think you can make this team work pretty well.
I really do I mean, you're right that I feel like depending on Excadrill will be locked to Terra Fairy, but he is creative coach, and Ghost and Flying are not also awful. He doesn't have a ghost type, so he can do Terra Ghost on Excadrill to block spinning. As you said before, I do like just the Sand option for Excadrill for the speed the speed tiers if something is faster than Shaman Sky. And just the fat Cincino there. I personally love that Pokemon a lot, so hopefully he uses it well.
Yeah, the one thing I don't love about your draft is it feels a little bit passive. If like in certain scenarios, like obviously like Aloe and Uxie are two of the more passive mons out there. Not that they don't have, U-turning and flip turning to get out of those situations, but it just feels like there's not necessarily a ton of immediate power outside of like Kyurem and like maybe Palafin once it like, does its 0 to hero shenanigans. So that would be my biggest worry with the team. But I think overall it does cover its weaknesses pretty well. I think it's going to be really annoying to try to break through, but also, there's a lot of teams that we've seen that don't do well into this type of team, where it's like they're just trying to break through everything and they don't necessarily have recovery of their own. And I think that's where this team is really going to shine at like outlasting some drafts that don't have great recovery, which is actually quite a few.
Yeah, I think it's bulky offense on the emphasis on offense. Like, I think in terms of like teams that aren't like regenerating and like clicking recovery safely, like I'm gonna have the edge in just because it's like really hard to get turns right when you have a Shaman, a Palafin, an Excadrill, and a Kyurem, and even T-Tar to an extent. But I think it's gonna rely a lot on like getting ahead early and like playing off of momentum.
I will say I think you do lack a little bit of like a bulky offense, like a wall breaker that can also take hits. Like, I feel like a lot of your wall breakers, like Palafin is somewhat bulky, Extra somewhat bulky, Tyranitar's kind of there, but it's not Terra, so like you can't really get out of bad matchups. Like if they have a fighting coverage move, then you're like, shoot, I don't really have a great switch into this Pokemon. I guess I'll just let Tar die or like maybe sack another Pokemon. And I guess so. Kyurem is going to be your main form of that. I guess Belly Bolt too. So I like Belly Bolt for that regard. But yeah, I think when I'm thinking about it, like your team has a lot of like really great ways to cover almost every Pokemon's coverage moves. Like Aloe and Uxie is just a really solid core in general. Like a fighting type that would normally be really annoying for your draft is just going to get punished by like a Rocky Helmet Uxie or Aloe Mamola, and you're not even like you're a little knock weak, yeah, but like it's still gonna like force progress, like Sand Chip, Rocky Helmet. Like you're just gonna wear teams down over time, which can allow for something like a Kyurem, a Palafin, or just Kyurem, Palafin, and Excadrill all in combination to really like. And that's not even to mention Shaman Sky just cleaning as well. So I think on paper it's kind of like hard to envision what scenarios there's going to be, but I think in practice it will be a little bit better than it looks just at a glance. So I mean I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 personally.
I'm gonna go high on myself. I like my odds.
Yeah, very, very solid draft.
I feel like Sean didn't even give that many thoughts, but he speaks highly. Well, you did give that one thing in the middle.
Yeah,
Okay.
honestly, like a lot of my concerns are kind of like nitpicky, and when I'm when I'm voicing my concerns about a draft and it feels nitpicky to me, that's just the sign of a really good draft.
I do think it's a tad ice week, but that's about it too. Like it's just gonna. I mean, like Palafin. Right. I guess, but a lot of ice types, freeze dry. So, but he also was one of the best ice types in the game to eliminate that off the board. So, which I think.
Ice.
What?
I could see freeze dry being an issue because it's neutral ice.
Like something like an Iron Bundle, like a Terra Iron Bundle, could be really annoying for this team. Perhaps. Okay, moving on to Dashing Sceptile. Very strange draft in my opinion, but I'll let other people. I don't have like a strong opinion about this. I don't know if you guys do either.
Yeah,
but
this might be my least favorite draft. I don't like the way it really came together. It's just too slow for my. Like, I know there's a Deoxys speed, but other than that, the fastest Pokemon naturally is Zarude. And sure, you have, like, Sticky Web option, but really, like, Sticky Web shouldn't be like, okay, I'm slow, I just throw Sticky Webs on, because if there's something that really, really hates getting Sticky Webbed, it's just going to run Boots.
And he doesn't really punish removal, which, like, his only spin blocker is Ceruledge and, like, Defog, I guess, Empoleon.
Competitive Empoleon.
Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, I think Deoxys speed wants a lot more support than this to like be effective. A lot of people end up running Deoxys speed with like Psychic Terrain, make it a little bit more offensive, and then like pair it with another terrain abuser. I think like it's kind of top heavy with like Ursa, Kyurem, Dio, and like I just don't really see the synergy because like Kyurem obviously is gonna break, but like it's gonna get chipped down like over time because it doesn't really love to run boots because we ban Dragon Dance. That's kind of I don't know if that's definitely something to mention. it always wants to run loaded dice because it needs to scale shot up to like outspeed stuff. So it's like taking Rock's Chip and Mach Punch is yeah.
What he's probably going to end up doing, and I think this is interesting, is he's probably going to either lead Kyurem or Deoxys Speed. And my thing with what I found with Kyurem, and I didn't say this explicitly to anyone before because I didn't want them to kind of know what I was doing, but Kyurem is a really great lead Pokemon. This Pokemon, if you lead Kyurem Black, it's probably going to force a kill. And whether you trade or you kill something, it's gonna put you on the at least even playing field, if not put you ahead. And it's kind of counterintuitive because you're like, oh, Kyurem Black, it's one of my main Pokemon. Why am I using it just to force a trade? But it's like if you get that turn right, like if say like I'll use my playoff example last season, or I don't know if I didn't lead it last time, but when I played Sean, like it just forces a Pokemon to like, okay, I'm going to try to cripple this thing or like maybe try to like, because it just doesn't die usually in one hit. So you can kind of get a lot of leverage with that. So it's interesting that synergy with Deoxys Speed, which is another Pokemon which it doesn't have Terra. So it may want to be more of a lead oriented Pokemon. And he also doesn't have a lot of hazard setting on this team. Like is it not just Empoleon and Dio? And yeah, I guess Spite Ops, but like, in terms of like viable hazards that he's like running on decent Pokemon.
Luck also technically has
Toxic Spikes, right? But
I think the hazard. I mean, Sceptile's always been a player that like disregards hazards,
and it works for him sometimes.
Hazard removal to a very large extent. We'll see, because like I think like you said with Kyurem Black, I think like Ceruledge and Zapdos are also Pokemon that like would prefer if they weren't either like boots locked or like had to dodge knockoffs in Zapdos' case.
Yeah.
Um,
Does this team
I
have any removal
I
at
really
all?
don't like draft as much. I can see the idea kind of with like Deoxys speed cleans up for stuff like that, Kieran Black and Ursaluna break, but I think Terra or Ursaluna Blood Moon is more of a sweeper as opposed to a breaker.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. We'll see. He did go Terra normal, so maybe he'll just try to do like Terra normal,
Blood Moon and just kill
you
shit.
know,
Because it's not
I
going
don't
to
know.
die to
Yeah.
most
We'll
things.
see how he decides to use it, because I think he does typically like. I'm not always a huge fan of Sceptile's drafts, but I think he usually knows
Yeah.
how to use his drafts very well. Like I think what he drafts, he usually uses what he drafts very well. So he has his, kind of specific style or his specific Pokemon.
I think he
that
just
does
tries
well
to use, like, he's like, oh, I haven't used Ursaluna Blood Moon with Terra. I'm going to use that. And then he kind of just uses Pokemon he likes to use. So
with.
he makes
But
it with what he is.
But exactly to what both of you said, to Sean saying that he completely ignores removal, and you saying, and I'm going to say that, oh, sorry, he doesn't have any removal. Not a single Pokemon on his draft has Defog or Rapid Spin. I'm making sure of that right now, and I do not see a single one. They have the spikes, Stealth Rock, Sticky Web, Toxic Spikes. It's got all the hazards, but he can be abused up the wazoo with all of them.
And I think really his game plan there is just like I'm gonna
Boots.
play too fast for hazards to matter.
Or that too, yeah.
So we'll see how that works for him.
We'll see.
Yeah. Skill shot, Kieran Black. I'm going to give this, I don't know.
Just on that, I'm giving it a 5, yeah.
4, yeah. I was honestly thinking even 3. Because, I don't know. It's strong, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like Ursaluna, once Ursaluna goes down, it's like, okay, now my physical, or, he doesn't really have any way to break on the special side. So I guess Zapdos, pulling on, I don't know. It's fun though. I think he'll have a fun time using it for sure. But again, like Sean said, it's very typical for him to draft kind of funky stuff, and then he'll just end up using it. Like, oh, okay, you know what?
He does use, and like my ratings are purely based on the draft. Like I'm not taking into account the player that's using it. So like
Yeah, same thing.
Account with like the stall draft that's high.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was just about to say, I probably would have rated Psy higher had we.
I think you gave him a 9, right? So you would, or maybe you did 8. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I would have given him a 10.
But yeah.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to another coach that we have in the call. So, Ant, why do you start us off with your explanation / feelings and thoughts on your own draft?
So from last season, I absolutely loved Goldango. I didn't really think I used him as versatile as he probably could be, and like making sure I block all of the spins and defogs and all that jazz. So I wanted to get him. I wanted to try Iron Valiant, just someone new, because I never really draft someone that high, like high on the tier board. Realistically, I usually go a little bit lower. But as usual, I love my regen core, but I couldn't get my favorite aloe from Sully because he sniped it from me. But either that, I love Hydrapple, Slowking. I couldn't get Galarian Slowking either, but honestly, yeah, it's just like the minor regen with Iron Valiant, Cleaver, Iron Jugulus to kind of be the main attackers, cleaners. That's about it.
Sweet. Okay. So I like your Terras on Goldango. I think Iron Valiant will be very solid on this team for sure because it's just a great versatile. It's like one of the better draft league Pokemon. It can do whatever it wants to do given the matchup. I do think it's a little bit overrated because I think it does kind of fall into that pigeonhole of like it can't really like do one thing really well. It just is really good at kind of forcing prep. And I feel like I've never had a matchup where I'm like, oh wow, dang, that Iron Valiant really scared the crap out of me. It's kind of just like breaking and like maybe can sweep with like booster energy, but it's really not strong enough to do that. But I think on your draft where you have a lot of momentum getters and Rotom Heat and Cyclozar, like you're going to be able to find opportunities for Iron Valiant to do well. So I I think it fits your draft pretty well. I do think you also have a good amount of recovery. So, like Sean was saying earlier, there's a lot of teams that are just going to struggle with something like Sully's draft where they're just going to get chipped down over time. I don't think you're going to necessarily have that problem because you have stuff like Clodsire too, alongside Cyclozar and Hydrapple, and especially Terra Hydrapple is super good on your draft because it allows you to kind of flip that type matchup, get a strong something like a Draco or a Fickle Beam or like a Leaf Storm or something that could kind of put these teams without as much recovery into a tough spot if you can get that turn right. So
Mhm. Personally, and I'm not like a huge fan of your draft. I don't see enough. Um, I think it's just lacking a little bit too much offensively and defensively compared to some of the other drafts. I think Valiant is not like typically what you want to do is like use these booster energy sets in kind of the late game. So I don't think you necessarily always want to be bringing it in early to like forcing progress because it has booster energy. You can only use it once. Goldengo, like you can use it offensively. You could also use it defensively. Um, there's just not a ton of like super. I think Iron Jugulus is not a good Pokemon. I don't I don't think I've ever seen it used like very well. So it just feels like a little bit of some we got the regen core with like Hydrapple and Slow King, but maybe just not hitting quite hard enough.
Yeah, there's just not immediate power. Like everything
And like
once.
the hazards, like your hazards are just okay. Like you know, I wouldn't look at this team and necessarily be like, man, I really can't remove those hazards because of Goldengo. When there's just like Cleaver has the Stone Axe that you can bring, Clodsire has rocks, and then like Sandslash I guess has some hazards, but it's not like a great like hazard setting team in general. So and like if you get up rocks via Stone Axe or Clodsire, it's like okay, I can deal with rocks being like the only hazard up. Um, it just feels like it just feels like a little bit lacking to me, and I think some of the Pokemon like Cyclozar can be good, especially if you get into like Iron Valiant. That could be like a really strong combo, but I don't really see too much else that like really would love a Ship Tail.
yeah, because
Because you
nothing's
list them
fast
like
enough to
those
abuse it
teams,
either.
similar to like the Keem's team where it's regen Pokemon that want to be switching in and out anyway, and bulkier stuff, and stuff kind of without setup option. I mean, maybe like a Shed Tail into a Nasty Plot Hydrapple. Um, but I don't love some of the choices you made personally, um, and it just makes it feel like the draft overall is a little bit lackluster.
I know that I personally drafted Hydrapple before, but it wasn't a Terra. Like it was just plain Hydrapple, and I thought it was pretty good there, but lackluster in those parts. But now having the Terra,
Mm-hmm.
uh, especially water, because it gets Hydro Pump, so I can get a stab water move if I really need it. Like as you say, it's like I don't feel like I have immediate power, but once I like my matchups come to me, I feel like things like the stab water will just maybe come in a more niche way than out and about, like right in front.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
think
to me
my
it feels like there's maybe a little bit too much pressure on like Hydrapple or Goldengo to be the ones to like break teams to position Iron Valiant to win.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my gripe is mostly like lack of like fast offense. I think Iron Valiant, like Sean was saying earlier, like doesn't love to be the one like to come in and like clean because or like even just break because it's like okay, if I wanted to sweep, now I have to use my booster energy. And it's like Iron Valiant cycles are you don't really have like you're gonna have to be kind of running like Cleavor and Rotom Heat like Scarf a lot, which may kind of take away. Like I think Cleavor and Rotom Heat are both amazing Scarfers, but it definitely is gonna kind of make your prep a little bit more predictable because you're like, okay, well he can't really beat me on this front unless he's Scarf. So he's probably going to be Scarf. I can scout for that. And then once I do, then I can kind of map a better game plan from there. So I was hoping maybe you'd have like one faster, like just strong wall breaker that was like above like 100 base speed or something. That's like not like Iron Jugulus. Um, so that's my main thing. Um, but I like Sand Slash as the kind of like a cool niche bring for like Slow King Chili.
Yeah, that was like the real only thing there. Yeah.
Probably the best 3-point you could have probably added to the draft. Gives you more spinning too, which is good for like a regen team. Like if you don't want to have to force to run boots, it's allows you a little bit more power on something like Hydrapple. You can run like a life orb or some boosting item or something. But yeah, overall I think it's a little below average. But again, you have the tools with the regenerator that I know, Ant, you're gonna be a decent enough builder where you're gonna be able to find those holes like you were saying with Hydro Pump, Hydrapple. So
Yeah, I'm not too mad about the upfront. It's not too, yeah, it's good. It's good.
it's very balanced. So I think you're gonna have you're gonna find ways to abuse it, and I know you can. So all right, moving on to Mr. Faultier Chunk, the Titanic Tinkatons.
1776. That's all I gotta say.
That's funny. I know Sean was talking earlier about his thoughts on Terra Thunderous and Terra Ursaluna versus some other options that he could have done, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all or kind of reiterate what you were saying earlier.
I think Terra Thunderous is like fine, like especially like Terra Flying is obviously nice. Terra Ice on an electric type that's fairly fast is always going to be pretty strong. I think Terra Ursaluna is like really bad. I don't think Ursaluna really gains almost anything from Terra. Personally, like I don't think you really need your facades to be that much stronger. I don't think it has enough defensive capabilities to like defensively Terra because it has no recovery. I don't love the Terra Ursaluna, but I mean Terra Thunderous is fine.
I think
not
Thunderous.
Like a Spectrier person myself, especially like the fact that like his fighting type is like Lucario.
Yeah.
Like typically you want to pair it with a little bit stronger of a fighting type.
Hey,
Although I
hey,
think
Thunderous, man.
Moon is still like fine.
I was gonna say I think Lucario would have been a better Terra captain than Ursaluna.
When I saw this team, I thought he was going to go Terra Lucario and Arboliva. I would have liked the team more if he had done that.
You know what? That's all you guys needed to say because I was telling him to Terra Lucario. Thank you. This is on camera now.
I agree that I think Spectre is a little bit easier to counter than like people think. Like I know we rate it really high just because it is Spectre and like it can snowball games. I do think that he did like support it pretty well though, because Glamora is gonna like force a lot of boots to be run if you don't have a grounded poison, which means that like Scarfers to Revenge spec are gonna be a little bit harder to come by. Things like Thunderous and Moon, like Moon can pop a booster energy in the middle of the game to start like breaking dark types for Spectrier. And again, I think in that sense, Ursaluna could be good to like help break in the middle game for Spectrier, but like maybe even using Spectrier more in the middle game to like break for Lucario, who probably has a little bit more checks in common.
Oh, I love Lucario. I love Lucario so much. Such a good Pokemon.
I just think this team is also lacking in priority, so like boosting up the E-speed on Lucario would have been a little bit better. But other than that, I think it's solid. I honestly like the double poison just because Weezing has the option to levitate, which can support Jirachi and Glamora.
I think
he's gonna run levitate like almost like if you don't run levitate, he's like super ground weak unless he's bringing like Seed Sower Arboliva.
Yeah, so he's gonna hate a Qian Pao though on this team. I guess he has Lucario with. I know Sean is traumatized.
Dark type check, which I also don't love. That it's like, yeah, I think it is fairly dark weak, but it definitely has options. I'm just not a fan of some of the Pokemon on the draft personally, like Rectrier or Jirachi. I don't think Jirachi is very good in Gen 9. I think Ursaluna is not a good Terra Pokemon. I'm not a Lucario fan. I'm a Lucario hater.
Oh, really?
So, personally, like, I don't love this draft.
Really?
I think I see the vision and I see what he was trying to do, and I don't think it's like bad, like necessarily synergy wise. I just think that I'm lower on the individual Pokemon quality of like what he drafted compared to like some other teams.
Like you think on paper, like without a ton of like ball knowledge, people would be like, "Oh, this
think
is."
like non-Terra Lucario is just gonna be tough to bring. I don't think it's like
Yeah, that's what I found because it's just too slow. Like it's not powerful enough. It's versatile, but in Gen 9, it's just tough.
very slow. It's not that strong unless you can like get some setup. But then also like are you gonna be faster than something after you set up?
Would you just do would you do Terra normal dual stab? Like what would you do? Or like Terra ghost? Like what would your Terras be
I
on
would definitely
Lucario?
do Terra normal. I would probably do Terra fighting, and then
Like
I don't know.
Ghost or
The last
I feel
one.
like Ghost or Steel would both be solid options.
I think Ghost would be a decent Terra type. Yes. I'd have to think about it more.
And then Arboliva definitely a fairy, and then like fairy, water, and fire maybe,
Steel is a good
or steel.
type for Arboliva.
He also doesn't like he lacks in fire coverage on this team, which is, as we always say, is definitely something to consider. Because what is like fire punch? Does Ursaluna get fire punch?
It does.
Does, and then Jirachi gets fire punch. So like
Weezing can fire blast.
I do think that not like I think fire coverage is pretty essential. So it's gonna be something I don't know. We'll see because I think he already struggles breaking steel. Like Spectre does not appreciate steals. So he's gonna have slower Saluna. So he's gonna rely a lot on Lucario, but a lot of steals aren't fast. So like he can find ways. I think I'm gonna give this an above average rating. I think I like it more because I just know Roaring Moon and Spectre can kind of just be annoying. I was gonna say 7, 6 between 6 and 7. I think Milotic also is a really solid fit for this draft as well. It's just gonna be fat and annoying and flip turning. So, and Arboliva as well. I don't think there's a bad mon in this draft other than allegedly Lucario, but if it has good matchups, it's gonna be fun. So. All right, Mr. Free. I don't know if he's even still around, but we're going to talk about it. Terra Volcarona, probably one of our more controversial allows, but is it more controversial than Giratina? Probably not.
Probably not.
I think Terra Volc is banned.
It absolutely tore up the league, but that was also like not limited to 3 Terras.
Right, exactly. So it's a little hard to tell.
Yeah.
I do think that he picked the like 3 Terra types that you run 90% of the time. You can make a case for like Fairy or Ghost.
I would have done ground personally.
I would have done Fairy over ground 100%, and I'll give my reasons why after you guys talk.
Please tell me.
Yes, Free. I'll let you know. Well, okay. I guess since someone's talking, so the only Pokemon you really want Terra Ground for is like Heatran, right? But we see how many dragons do we in Terra Water.
Drafted it too. You could just run Terra Water.
Right, exactly. So Terra Ground is kind of like, yeah, it was good when it was like Gen 7 and you're like, okay, I need that like coverage move that's going to like OHKO Heatran because Terra Water wasn't really doing a lot, and then they could like Magma Storm trap you and stuff and you're like on the back foot because then you couldn't roost it off. Unless you're running like Fire and HP Ground, which whatever. Regardless, Terra Fairy is like that defensive turn that you need versus like an offensive dragon, right? Like think of like Dragapult or something like that, right? I have a turn Volcarona versus Dragapult. They're like, okay, if I go for my dragon move here and he's Terra Fairy, I'm in a horrible position. So it just forces a lot of mind games that I really think could win you games because you're getting that +1, and if they get the turn wrong, then you're at +2, and now you could potentially just sweep. If there's not a lot that can deal with the +2 Volk.
In his defense, I think his team handles dragons very, very well between Prima, Corv.
Oh, it's not about dealing with dragons. It's about exploiting. Like in a Volk team, you want to be exploiting any opportunity that you can to set up, and I think Fairy does that really well. So that's my opinion why because I've used Terra Fairy Volk a lot before it was banned, and it was incredible because there was just so many good dragons, and there's a lot of good dragons in draft too. So
I can change it. Before I had like fucking Terra Electric or anything to resist flying more, and I was trying lot of action off of like the last one.
And it gives you coverage too. Like a lot, you really don't have a great way of hitting dragons with Volk, so it's like another way to do that. That's a random tangent that I went down, but like just Terrablast Fairy with Volk is so nice for something like a Dragapult or a Kyurem, like all these Pokemon that can, or I guess Kyurem doesn't resist your fire moves, but like just these ways to hit you opponents with a stab move that's super effective. Anyway, I rest my case. Other people can talk about the draft in its entirety.
Overall, though, I think it's just gonna be really annoying. I personally probably would have gone Terra Bug on Haxorus, especially.
That's what I was saying.
That it turned out, because I think, especially with Corviknight, I think Corviknight excels at really getting in strong like breakers like that, and I think Choice Banded Haxorus with like Choice Banded Terra Bug first impression is just gonna be like very difficult to deal with for a lot of teams when, you know, there are a lot of types that resist bug, but there's not a lot that wants to come in on like a choice banded earthquake or like dragon claw or scale shot or outrage or whatever other move that, you know, there's almost nothing that's like loves to just switch into Axorus. But I think overall with like Corviknight, like bringing in these very annoying Pokemon to deal with, like Meowscarada, like Haxorus, like Mamoswine. I think there's a lot of good synergy there. Personally, I don't think Garganacl is a very good pick at all. I don't think it meshes with the team almost at all. I don't really see a huge reason why you would bring it ever when you have a Corviknight. I guess like
Rocks, basically.
kind of annoying. Like maybe some stuff runs Covert Cloak because they don't want to get Salt Cured, and it forces a little bit of prep that way, or the other way around where things don't prep for it and Salt Cured can be okay. I don't see really the vision with Garganacl.
I think it's just going to kill a lot of the momentum.
It just looks like, yeah, it's really a momentum killer, which I think this team otherwise is excellent at bringing in heavy hitters, and then like hopefully you can set up for a Volcarona sweep at the end. The other thing I don't like is that the only hazard setters are Garganacl and Mamoswine. I think again it's like going to be hard to bring Garganacl in with this team, and I think it's going to, you know, Mamoswine isn't something that wants to be okay. I'm going to run rocks on Mamoswine again. Not that it can't, because you could just run stabs, ice shard, rocks every week and still be relatively okay. But I don't think it's a role that it really thrives in.
Yeah, it's gonna hurt.
I think the guard slot would be better with like a rock setter that could actually like pivot and still have a little bit of defensive presence.
And then maybe you can use like a few more of those
or
points.
At least like even if it couldn't pivot, maybe if it had more of an offensive presence, so it could actually at least force like offensive switches and kind of, you know, not necessarily be a pivot, but at least not be like such a big momentum sink.
Do you think a Regirock would be good, or is that like not too defensive?
It's still a little passive, like
right, like
I know
body
Rhyperior
press.
was taken. I think Rhyperior would have been like a much better pick, especially just to get like another ground type. Not that it's like super electric weak or anything, but you know, there's a couple things that don't enjoy electrics. Like I don't think Mamoswine is like a fantastic electric check. If you offensive check that, but you know, there's obviously has double Terra Ground on his Pokemon. You know, I guess that's one benefit. You could say, okay, I'm going to be Terra Ground Volcarona. But most of the things that are checking Mamoswine are probably going to be able to hit a Terra Ground Pokemon super effectively as well, if they're like an electric type. You know, with something like a Grass Knot or.
But on a really positive note, I really, really, really love Haxorus on the Terrace. I'm so excited to see how you use it, because not only are you a creative builder, but that Pokemon is just like, it has a lot of really cool options, like Sean was saying, with like Choice Band First Impression, Scale Shot. You can be like Scale Shot loaded dice, or just Scale Shot straight up, like raw with like Dragon Fang or something, and then you like Terra Dragon and just kill some stuff.
I think Haxorus is like right there with like, I thought Terracomo last season was like really, really cool. I think Haxorus functions a little bit different, but it's like one of those undervalued Terra captains that's just going to be really, really hard to prep for, because like obviously Terra Volcarona is like S tier, like really, 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 really good. I can't emphasize like how good it is enough, but like Terra Haxorus, like Terra Dragon Scale Shot, Ground and Steel to like steel specifically to pop fairies, ground type to like pop steel type. Like you always have to respect that. So
Yeah.
I think these are like S tier Terra captains.
And I don't know, are there any fairies that can really deal with Corviknight? Like, I feel like there's very few that can kind of beat Corvi 1v1. Maybe like
It's
Wheezing.
pretty difficult.
Wheezing, maybe. Like, there's very few.
Let me ask one thing though. Do you guys think that so with the mode breaker, do you think Terra Ground is worse than Bug?
I don't think it's worse. I just think the Terra Bug first impression would be like one of those things that you always have to keep in your mind for prep. So
I
it's
think
like
the only thing you could say about that is like it kind of goes back to the point of like a Pokemon that wants to click Terra right away versus a Pokemon that wants to save Terra in the back. And if you're running Terra Bug Haxorus, you probably want to click Terra right away because otherwise you're not getting the value, and then you don't have Terra Volcarona in the back. So I can see that angle. But I also want to say I really like Zoroark Hisui on this draft because I think there's a lot of Pokemon that like a Corviknight slow U-turn brings in, and then there's a lot of Pokemon that are very threatening that you have to deal with in certain ways that are also neutral to rocks. So you don't necessarily have to run like Zoroark Hisui in order to disguise it very well. Like Mamoswine, Meowscarada, and Haxorus, I think are all, and even to an extent Primarina, are all Pokemon where it's like Zoroark is going to have a lot of a field day with what it wants to do, Illusion, and just kind of like adds a little bit more chaos into the mix. So I think that was a really good pick on this draft.
Yeah,
I think the Terra Bug Haxorus would also force people to be running like Protect, and Zoroark, which like really like Volcarona appreciates, like giving up a move slot like to run Protect
or just
like,
a turn in the game, like just to run Protect.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, he's running Boots Volcarona, but it's disguised as Zoroark. You're like, okay, well, it could be Terra Bug Hacks, or I guess if it was Volcarona, but if you have Protect, it's just a lot of mind games. So, and in that regard, I think I like some of the synergy you have. I think there are ways you could make it even better too, which I think is why we're nitpicking a little bit. So I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. Even I think 8 is fair too.
I think I'd go higher without the Gargan with Terra Bug.
I can understand the logic for Terra Ground. I think Terra Bug was an interesting option, but I don't think it's like I don't think it's like strictly better.
My only rationale was like rocks. Not a lot of great rockers other than Garg. And even then, Momentum Killer, Hitmontop, having to be forced to become. I guess Corviknight's like the best remover in the game, but for a team with Volcarona, like I feel like, I don't know, you have to be pretty cautious.
You're probably just still running Boots.
Yeah, you're running Boots, and it's Terra. Like, what am I saying? So, yeah, maybe I'll. You know what? I'll as I talk to myself up. Yeah. So anyway, moving on to the second to last draft, we have Sean and his Air Force Corviknights with his very, very top-heavy but very scary draft. There's something to be said about
I've ever seen like a top 3 as scary as this, and by top 3 I mean top 2 plus bottom 1, because I wasn't even planning on going Garchomp, which is why it's the last round pick, and then I got sniped on some other ground types, and I was like, hey, Garchomp is still there, and I was considering some other Terras, and then I was like, well, I could just Terra Garchomp as well, just to have like the option. Probably still mostly going to Terra Enamorous week to week, but I think Garchomp having the option to Terra just makes it like one more threatening. But yeah, I didn't really have like a huge plan going to the season, and then I had the opportunity to take Chen Pao again. I think it's very, very good, and the second best Pokemon that's allowed behind Giratina, so I took it. I think Terra Enamorous is one of the best Terra Pokemon. I think it has fantastic synergy with Chen Pao as like a physical special combo. I think it's very difficult to deal with. I think Terapagos is one of the best offensive checks. I think it's a very good Pokemon at beating other offense for offensive drafts. Not that it can't fit on defensive drafts either, but I think it fits my it's like a really important piece on this draft because kind of the way it ended up being is like pretty balls to the wall offense. And, I'm going to use like Chen Pao and Terra Namorous and Terra Garchomp and apply a lot of pressure and then try to win
Mhm.
games. And I think Terapagos is excellent in that scenario because it can set up almost completely for like, unless there's like a faster taunt Pokemon, you're not going to OHKO a Terapagos. So it could almost always get a Rock Punch
Well,
off.
what
It
about
really
Mold
wants to.
Breaker?
Um,
Ability
Even then,
Shield?
it's still got good natural bulk. I don't think there's any really mold breaker Pokemon that would OHKO it anyway.
Hello, Hax. Hello, Haxorus.
I don't think that would, unless you're like choice banded,
Close combat?
Dragon Outreach. Um, but anyways, I tried to support that. I've actually never drafted Klefki before, so I'm kind of interested to use it. I think it fits this draft extremely well, given that I can run screens to help um, my other Pokemon like take some more hits that they otherwise wouldn't. I've got, I think, excellent hazard stack on this team between Tentacruel and Klefki mostly, and then Garchomp can stack hazards. I think Annihilate is probably the second best hazard deterrent in the game behind, or hazard removal deterrent in the game behind Goldingo. Um,
Agreed.
and I think, honestly, like I don't think people run like a utility-ish Annihilate enough because obviously all we really need
Oh, it's
for
so
coverage
good.
is like ever like Rage Fist and Drain Punch or Close Combat, fighting move.
I
So I
think
think we could
Annihilate.
easily just run a set like Stabs, Stealth Rock, U-Turn, and just make it like a little bit more defensive. I think it beats a lot of like fighting types that way.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of fighting types that are just kind of annoyed by it being a ghost type that's not weak to knock off. It's not weak
Mhm.
to a lot of common coverage that a lot of fighting types get.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Annihilate and Enamorous like enable Chien-Pao really, really well. When I was initially looking at your team, I kind of was like, oh, he's gonna like struggle to take hits, but like even if you are like, I think this team might struggle a little bit if you go down in games early, but like if you can like kind of like bulk your way like to the mid game and like have Annihilate take a few hits to like help it break things, have an Amorous, Chien-Pao, and Garchomp like break things. I think if you can like stay even with people through like the first like 20 turns, like you
I feel
like
like that's so long.
automatically kind of get. You think that's long?
Yeah, in Gen 9. I think it's got to be like first. If he can stay with them for like the first 8 turns, then he's probably gonna.
Well, I was just saying, I think like if you, yeah,
But I
exactly.
see
I
what you're
think if
saying.
you can stay with, I think if you can stay with people through the beginning of the game,
Right.
like your cleaning options are like elite.
I just thought it was funny that 15, 20 turns. I feel like that's like a very like. But I don't know. That's not long game, but for an early game, that was arbitrary though. Regardless, but yeah, I agree with Sully. I think your team is very, it has a lot of deterrence to things like spinning and just getting annoying. I do think I wish you had a way to remove hazards a little bit better. I know you have Avalugg and Tentacruel, but you don't have Defog. And Terapagos. What am I saying? You have good ways to do it, and you also have good ways to deter it with Hatchram. So I do think there's a little bit of negative synergy with Klefki and Chien-Pao because Chien-Pao you can very easily just run fighting coverage for like Brick Break or something. So I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios where someone's like, oh, well, I have to take out Chien-Pao anyway. Maybe instead of running like this other fighting move, I just run Brick Break because I feel like Klefki screens is pretty
But that's
decent.
kind of why I wanted like the Annihilate because I think it's something
Right.
where it's like, if you, especially if you run like a little bit bulkier set, invest a little bit more into the defenses. It's got like pretty decent bulk. So now
Yeah.
I'm like immune to the Brick Break. I probably got screens up if you're trying to click Brick Break, and now I'm powering up my Rage Fist. And
Right.
that was kind of the thought process there.
That's very fair. But I do think it's a little, and it gets Defiant too. Oh yeah, what am I saying? You have a way to deter defog too, so it's not anti-defog at all. I say because I don't have defog on my team, and Sean is my week 1 opponent, so there's a little bit of like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. But yeah, I do agree with your guys' comments where it's like, this team definitely has downside in that like it doesn't have a lot of staying power and it doesn't necessarily have the best defensive options. Like there's going to be some matchups where it's like this Pokemon is really hard to check defensively, so I'm going to have to rely on checking it offensively. And I think this draft, more so than any other draft in the league, is going to be relied on by like the player, and like I'm gonna have to make aggressive plays in game in order to stay ahead or to get ahead, um, which is a double-edged sword because if I can make good plays, I think this team could really just steamroll pretty much any draft. And if I fail those plays and I make the wrong reads, like I could easily get steamrolled myself.
I
So
I
it's kind of
think
a high
that
risk, high reward.
I think that Sceptile though, like if you use it early in games to like shed tail, it's gonna be really, really hard to predict like, okay, Sceptile's in, it's really fast, it's gonna get this shed tail off. Qianpao, Anam, Annihilate, and Garchomp all have like very different like defensive profiles. So
Even
like
like Terrapagos, because like you could just run boots, have
exactly.
Terra Shell active, which is still active behind the shed tail, and then
Yeah.
once that gets broken and it deals a little bit of chip damage or maybe like toxics its check, then I
Mm-hmm.
can switch out, still have my Terra Shield active, possibly even do it again later.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple like healing wish options as well, which I like. Like that's what I kind of mostly drafted Hatcham for at one point, was like the option to run healing wish, but also magic bounce is like useful in some scenarios.
I
In
think
order
that
to like, maybe I lead with Terrapagos. I don't even like bother to run boots, and like run some kind of boosting item or leftovers or whatever. Use it to almost break early game, and then
Mm-hmm.
come in like healing wish.
No,
Sometimes
lead like
you can
lead
fit
rock
healing wish
polish.
in some Enamorous sets as well if I don't want to bring my one pointer. Um, so I did like a lot of those like mini synergies with this draft that I think helped it come together very well.
Lead rock polish power. What's
Meteor
the meteor beam?
Yeah. Could
Kind
be
of
fun.
use it in the same vein that we were talking about Kieran Black.
Terra Garchomp definitely looks like the scariest thing on this draft. I guess alongside with Chen Pao, but like I don't know why Terra Garchomp just sounds that much scarier.
Absolutely.
At least to me, at
I
least.
think I'm gonna have a lot of options every week on how I want to approach things, and it's gonna be very tough to defensively check this draft.
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, I was gonna say. I think you're offensively you're phenomenal, like 10 out of 10. I think defensively you're just gonna have to play really well in order to like position yourself in a position where you can win. And you have good prio with Chen. I love Enamorous is such an annoying Pokemon to deal with because you don't know what necessarily it's gonna do, and you have to get that turn right, or like have a proper fail safe for it in case it's like, oh shit, it's like Scarf. Damn. Okay. Well, now this is like changed my whole game plan. If you were playing it like it was Calm Mind or something.
Versus like some kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
Versus like a superpower physical set.
Mm-hmm. Or like Terra Stellar, Terra Blast, where you're like, oh shoot, now because that's really cool. What I love about Terra Stellar is it gives you both the physical and the special, so it's like you're really not escaping on either side. You're like shit. And there's so many great Terra captains too.
Contrary with agility.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're either running like Scarf or you're like not that fast. But I did like Terra Stellar a lot, especially because there's a lot of like high tier Terras out there. And so being able to guarantee a super effective move regardless of what my opponent brings,
that's actually benefiting you too. Like I'm like, okay, now I'm +1/+1. Like exactly. Maybe like Choice Scarf Terra Stellar is one of the best revenge killers in the game, unless it's like a faster Pokemon. But there's very few faster +1 Pokemon than Enamorous. So yeah, I really like that. So I'm gonna give this an 8 solely because I think the offense is amazing, but I think that the defensive struggles will. But I know you're a good player. But as we say, like it's all in the draft, not the player. So all right, finally. We thought it wouldn't be as long as the other video because there was 2 less coaches, but you thought wrong. Okay, so my draft, I'll kind of be curt because I don't really want to keep this video going longer than possible, but I really like Terra Dragonite. I thought it was a really cool thing that I wanted to try. We allowed it, so Terra Normal Flying Steel is deliberating between Ground and Steel because Ground is really good. To kind of freeze... I kind of actually like Terra Ground and Haxorus because I'm looking at a lot of matchups and I'm like, wow, Terra Ground kind of breaks through teams because like Dragonite really likes that extra like stab boost on its Earthquakes to really kind of break through teams, and just it alone is not really great. But Terra Normal is obviously amazing because it basically like a choice banded E-Speed for free. plus boosting item if you have that. Terra Flying is always going to be an interesting bring because you could run like Terra Blasts to, which I don't love, but it's like probably my least favorite Terra because you're not flipping type matchups. So it's not like Steel, it's like a defensive Terra, but it's also like there are going to be some matchups where Flyings are going to be really good offensively, and it's one of the better flying attackers in the game. But you do have to waste Terra for that. But anyway, Darkrai kind of paired decently well with it. Defensively, it's whatever, but it does have the option to be that fast special attacker, which I kind of wanted to pair with Dragonite being kind of fast-esque physical breaker. Then kind of adding on to that, I thought Iron Moth was really cool because it kind of fills in a speed gap that I knew would be a problem later, so I wanted a good way to do that, plus also deal with the steel types that Dragonite and Darkrai deal with, plus also simultaneously dealing with the fairy types as well that the two struggle with. Not really a great fairy check, which is kind of one of the gripes of my draft that I kind of couldn't really fix later on. But we'll get into that more in the critique section. Apologize to Sean for the Ting Lu snipe, but I did not want to face it on a team that was primarily special offense with Dragonite, and the Dragonite can't really break through Ting Lu super well. So I kind of was like, all right, and not that I was like specifically for Sean, but I just never wanted to play a Ting Lu, and I was like, it fits my draft relatively well, even though it's a double dark. I think my main things that I wish I had better on this draft, or I just wish I had better removal. I know Fortress is a pretty good remover, and Quable's there as well. I just wish I had like a defogger. Could be really nice in some games because, you know, a team with Dragonite, a team with Iron Moth does not really appreciate having it, and I think Quable kind of loses out if it's having to run Rapid Spin every week, and having to run Fortress a lot is not great either. But you do have some fast taunt mons like Darkrai. I think Quack gets taunt, Comfy gets taunt. And I think this team will really thrive in kind of being a surprise factor of like, he's bringing this Pokemon. I think Elitros is definitely a Pokemon that has some really solid matchups and can offensively deal with a lot of Pokemon. And Comfy is a really solid second Terra captain. What's up?
How'd you pronounce that?
Electros?
Electros?
Yeah. Technically, it's I don't know. Electros. Tomato.
Think this team is going to do really well because it's just like, what flavor of the week do I want to clean you with? Between like Dragonite, Darkrai, Moth, Quavo, Crown, Sinistra, Comfy. Like, you have tons of win conditions on this team. And then like your win condition, like Quavo, Lu, Crown, Sinistra, Eel, Fortress can all be run defensively. Like, you have options to like run different defensive cores every week to like support whatever you identify as like your best win condition, which I think is going to be like, I think this team is going to rely heavily on like prep because like you have to identify like what is going to win me this game. And you have a lot of options, and it's like, how am I going to support that? Because like a lot of times I felt like last season, I know Darkrai had a lot of kills, but like some of it was kind of just on accident. Like in prep, like would think of it more like, all right, it's going to break for
it's a breaker more solo.
And then it would just end up like securing kills because like I would just like play it well. But like I think this team is going to do really well in that respect. Like Lou just getting up hazards and like being annoying, and then like just getting stuff in to like chip stuff down and be like, all right, this mon just got enough chip, and like this thing just comes in and wins now.
Yeah, and I think Sinistra will be a great way to like, because it's not like a necessarily win condition, but like with Ting Lu, I thought it was really cool. I was debating between that and like Brambleghast as like a grass ghost, but Brambleghast is a lot more offensive, and it's a decent spin blocker, and it's kind of like you can just sack it, and then you can bring in something like a Dragonite or a Darkrai or a Quack to kind of just like, all right, now this is just going to spiral out of control. So I like Sinistra for more defensive presence, and it gave kind of like, yeah, you still won't be able to spin, but it also allows me like more extra turns to do something else. Granted, it does allow the opponent extra turns, but with good priority in things like Dragonite, and also like pretty decent speed control with like a Booster Moth or Scarf Dragon or Scarf Darkrai, or like even a sturdy Fortress to potentially like just save a kill, and then good Comfy as well. I think this team is going to be very interesting, and I'm excited to like just prepping already. It's fun because I'm like, oh, exactly what you were saying, Sully. Like you can really choose like what I want to bring, and it doesn't feel pigeonholed, which was kind of my annoyance with last season's draft. Like I felt like I had to bring certain things, and it still felt like I had to play it really well in order to like put myself in a winning position.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that like you didn't pair Dragonite with like a Terramon that like always wants to click Terra. Like uh I didn't have Terra on Darkrai last season, and it like was still really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dragonite wants to click Terra in like the majority of its matchups.
Absolutely.
And then the Comfey that comes, in situationally to like all wind up and like break through things that it couldn't break through alternatively.
Yeah. It's just like
I
something
think
you have to consider. It's like that. It's like same with like if I did Terra Sinistra, like you have to respect Terra Comfy because if you don't like Calm Mind, Terra Ground, or like flipping the type matchup with like Terra Steel, like being like, oh shoot, now I just clicked a poison move. Now he's at +1. Now he's at +2. It's like, yeah, if you had your offensive check to Comfy, like if you got rid of the Pokemon that could offensively.
Like, my minion or my Pokemon for killing steel types is a fighting type. Well, now it's a +2 Comfy. It doesn't even care how fast you are. Like
Yeah.
you're not out prioritizing Draining Kiss. You're in a really rough situation.
Yeah, it's deceptively bulky. That last Terra was something I really was like deliberating on because there's really not a great matchup for Terrifier. There's like a few I was looking at, so I might end up like FAing that, but overall,
Like fire is because again, like it is a little bit fairy weak. Like Iron
yeah,
Crown can offensively beat fairies, but it's not great. Like it doesn't want to repeatedly switch into them defensively, which is also why I like Terra Steel on Dragonite, not only because of like ice
Mhm.
type moves and putting that fear in where ground type obviously wouldn't. I think like having an option like maybe like a Terra Steel Dragonite with Roost and you run it defensively
Mhm.
and then like boom that like really like completely shuts down a fairy type that's otherwise really annoying.
Yeah, and then they
Which
most don't have coverage for steals other than yours truly, but um, it'll be interesting for sure how
yeah, I do
because
like this draft.
I'm glad you
I
guys like
have.
it. Minus yeah, and go ahead.
It's like I had Dragonite last season, and it's like he brings the power to the table. But it's just my one gripe, or like the gripe with him, is that with the move pool, you have to have Terra flying because he doesn't have a viable flying move. I mean, Terra Normal's great for E speed, and that really just leaves one left as Steel, as you were saying before, of like, well, you kind of want a defensive one if there's opposing fairies or anything else like that, or the ice types, like Sean said. So I'm like, I feel like Dragonite is one of those Pokemon that he brings all of the power to the table, no doubt. But he's kind of a Terra locked Mon with those three Terra types. You're not gonna really throw a freaking other Terra type on him.
But I feel like that's kind of good in that regard, right? Because you want a mon that can run three very viably, and like each kind of provides a different thing. Like you kind of that is the one issue that I have. It's like kind of like you know what that your game plan's gonna be, or like semi what that game plan's gonna be by looking at the Terra. It's like, oh, he's Terra flying. Okay, so he's probably gonna be this, and this. Oh, he's Terra normal. Like to an extent, like you like, oh, he could be
Yeah.
banded, choice band, e speed, or he could be like a defensive Terra Steel, or maybe he could be offensive Terra Steel, or like defensive Terra Flying too, because maybe like you can just take like fairy hits better. You're not weak to it anymore, but you still get that added stab boost. And plus an actual flying move that's good. And I do think that there's like aerial ace too. Like it's not like you're not locked to running Terra Blast. Obviously Terra Blast is like the best move, but say you don't necessarily always want to click Terra, like, and flying is really good offensively, then or you already clicked it with Comfy, you're not like necessarily locked. So, but that is definitely a gripe. But yeah, so I think fairy weakness is one thing. I do
you say
think
you're fairly weak, but like you have a moth and an iron crown, like, and like I, yeah, you have to get them in, but
They really
I
can. They're a little bit vulnerable.
yeah, because Crown doesn't really have great recovery, but at the same time, it's really good offensively into fairy. So like, what I really wanted to do was
He
get
has
a
good
bunch of
offensive
pivoting
checks.
too.
I don't think he has the best defensive checks. Like Fortress can check some, but a lot of them are like special, and Fortress doesn't have the greatest special bulk.
But also like Ting Lu is kind of like not really a fairy weakness too. I don't know if that's what.
Yeah, I was just saying the same thing. Like Ting Lu is like a fake fairy weakness. Like it shrugs off hits. And I was telling him like I expect him at one point this season to run like a more offensive Ting Lu because I think naturally it has the bulk to take stuff on, and people just kind of expect it to be passive. But it has what like base 110 attack. I think there's going to be a matchup this season where you can like sneak run like a choice band or something.
Yeah,
and,
that'd
like,
be so
break
fun.
something.
Or even like weakness policy sets. I think a lot of Pokemon in this draft, you're like, oh shit. It's like Iron Crown. You're like I just set it up in agility. You're like, oh shoot, and it's like you just immediately opens up the game. Like I think that's what it's gonna be, kind of like Sean's draft, where it's like if I can break or like get a set that's like wins, like or like just can open up the game, then it's like it's wraps. But if I can't play it properly, then something like Zai's team could just tear me open because my recovery is fine. Like I have Roost Dragonite, Roost Quavel, Morning Sun. Like I have ways to last with like Ting Lu and stuff, but it's not really meant to play the long game if it doesn't want to. It wants to try to win when it can, and it's gonna be it'll be interesting.
You
to
have
see.
options though to run like offense, like special attack, booster energy moth, and like special attack booster energy crown to like get that last little oomph,
Yeah,
like breakthrough.
I don't know. I like the draft, but we'll see how it is in practice. I think I just see Electros and Fortress. I'm like, oh no, like I think we're a little behind the eight ball, but I think they provide very valuable roles to what the team needed. So yeah, but honestly, there really wasn't a bad draft on the here. I think we all had a good amount of solid drafts. I think that just happens with 12 people in a season, and everyone can kind of get what they want to the most part, even though we got sniped more times than most drafts, which is ironic. But
we had kind of a forgiving budget as well, so like I think everyone got a little taste of their team being good.
Yeah, like the lowest score was like in the just slightly below average, which I think is very accurate to how I feel like everyone has a shot to win. Like a good team, like these top rated power ranking teams could go like 3-7, like, and they would not have like a necessarily they played bad. They just like, oh shoot, like they got out prepped. Like it happens, right? And so I think there's a lot of room for like some fun shenanigans this season. So I'm excited to see how it pans out. But yeah, so that's gonna be the end of the video. Any closing thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like this season's going to have the biggest surprising with the scores and records of these coaches.
Yeah, like this could be a season where like I don't make playoffs because there's just so many good coaches and there's just such little room for error in terms of like the high power level plus like Sean, there's only what 16 playoffs, or is it 8?
It's exactly half.
Okay, so 6. So that's kind of a low like there's going to be some really good coaches that might miss this. So we'll see how that pans out, but I'm excited for the season start. Sully and Sean, do you guys have any closing thoughts?
No, just hoping everybody has a good season. Hope everyone has fun.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, sorry for the good luck, and sorry for the long video again, but hopefully you can just put this on in the background and do dishes or something. Who knows? But yeah, signing off. Good luck, everyone. Peace.